It's 6 p.m. Welcome back to Theorycraft, a live podcast where game developers and their players engage in conversation. I think that's it. I'm not like reading off the script anymore, so it's kind of like a little bet every week. But today we are going to be doing the last of our kind of 3-part series of sharing stuff that we worked on and walking you through the process. I'm going to go a little later today. Man, I've just spent the last hour here basically trying to rig up some presentation setup to audition sounds through Discord stages, and it's kind of a fucking pain in the ass. I would prefer not to do this again, but we'll see how that goes. Not ideal, but through the magic of post, I can probably get it all working afterwards, in the edit. Let's get into it. Chris, what have you been up to?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I didn't even know. It feels just like yesterday we were on the other call. It's been kind of chilly down here in SoCal, so I just feel like now I'm not prepared. I need I forgot I didn't bring my hoodie today, so I'm just cold. So there's that. I don't know.
Didn't you? Yeah, okay. You're clearly pretty fucking occupied if the weather's the first thing that comes to mind. That's all good.
Yes.
No gaming, no news of the secret front that you can share?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still working on this project that I do want to share with everybody in a couple weeks, probably. So just working on that, and I downloaded New World, but the queue was so long, I just haven't jumped in yet. So it might just be something I do this weekend. We'll just see. But I was just playing some Smash Brothers the other night.
Wait, which Smash?
The Switch one.
The Switch one, local. Yeah. With some real life.
Yeah, people? I was just trying some of the other characters that I haven't really played. And then I was playing online for a bit, and then I was like, oh, it's been a few hours, but it's fun.
Dope. Do you still got it? Does it feel? It feels good.
I think they buffed Kirby, and Kirby's my main, so it felt a little better than last time I played. That game, it's kind of just StarCraft. You just have to get back into it, and you have all this rust every time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think if I could replace any and all physicals with just having to play Smash Brothers for an hour or two, I think that's just the way I'd like to measure my own cognitive decline. I think my Smash Brothers skill is just going down linearly with age, and it's like dating the rings on a tree. I do get slightly worse all the time, and I feel like I used to be great in my brain, anyways. But well, that sounds like fun. Light one then. Candace, what have you been up to?
Oh, little old me. I am enormously proud of the Amazon team for launching New World. I so desperately wanted to play it yesterday, but I actually had to go up to Riot Campus yesterday to get my headshot done. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, shit.
I had to get a COVID test in order to get that done, so I got my little nose swabbed and drove up there around noon or so to miss the traffic, because for those who don't know, I live about an hour and a half worth of traffic. If there's no traffic, maybe an hour away from Wright's campus. So I decided that whenever that was done, I would go apartment searching. So I made some appointments to go tour some apartments whenever my headshot was all done. It was a lot of fun, though. I got to attend a meeting from live campus. I did real work from the office for the first time since the pandemic started, and it was cool. I was in an office shouting into my phone, realizing that when I try to speak loudly, my voice strains. And so it was kind of a difficult conversation that we were having. And then at some point I realized they can't see my face because I had a mask on because I was in the office. And here I am so here's what I think, guys. And at some point I had to pull my mask down and be in case you can't tell, I'm not angry right now. I'm just shouting because it's a fucking echoey office. So it was a lot of fun. I had a professional makeup artist put makeup on my face. She spackled me up real good. She put eyelashes on me. That's why I took a Twitter selfie. I was like, shit, I have not looked this good in a year and a half.
Yeah, you got to make
and somebody else,
makes
somebody
a lot
else
of
did
sense.
this.
I was wondering
so
what
I'm going
that
to
was
take
about.
a picture of this. Yeah, and then I toured fancy ass $6,000 apartments with my freshly spackled face. So they took me seriously. It was kind of nice. And
so
then I got
was that
home,
the first time you were at the Riot campus, or?
I'd been to campus twice before that. Yeah, twice. Once back in 2015 or something. I had a friend who was interviewing there, and I begged to come do a tour And then I happened to run into Greg Street actually back then, and he's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you should come have lunch." And so he swiped his badge in for me to eat lunch at their fully subsidized cafeteria.
Oh,
That was my only
great.
impression of Riot. And then I got to go to like you have to like go pick up your badge and do all that stuff. And so I went back to do that a while back. And then now my headshot. So it was a lot of fun. But the point is that then I didn't end up getting home until like 9 or 10 p.m. because of I didn't want to drive home in traffic, so I got
Yeah,
dinner out
yeah.
there and
Hang
stuff
out.
like that.
Basically, you're just trapped in LA, just hanging out there because it's not worth driving back like in rush
Exactly.
hour. Yeah.
And so my thinking was that I was going to get home and play New World until like 1 or 2, till it was my bedtime. But then like you said, the queue had something to say about that. And I was like, all right. So I didn't get to play New World. I'm very sad. I was really hoping to play on launch day, but it just didn't. Those cards weren't dealt to me. So
Yeah, they weren't dealt
Yeah,
to really many of
I've
us.
never been to the Riot campus, so I think after you guys get situated, I'll come crash the place. That'll be fun.
yeah, I think there's no visitors allowed because it's COVID protocol. But yeah, once I'd be happy. That'd be awesome. You'd like it there.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Hmm.
How's about you, Luca?
How's about me? Well, I'm waking up really early lately. That's top of mind because I'm tired.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. Suddenly, I just get up at like 6 a.m. or even slightly earlier every day now. And that's been going on for like 2 weeks. And I'm just kind of leaning into it. But means I don't really have a lot of, like, we chatted last night. Was it last night? And I started kind of like winding down, at like 9 p.m. Yeah. So
Totally.
I don't love that part of it, but there is something satisfying to being up early. It's almost like we're built for it or something. I don't know. I'm working back in the office a little bit more again. That's great. We have tomorrow off because tomorrow is Canada's first National Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is in honor of the commission formed to like investigate and prosecute, seek reparations for all the crimes committed against First Nations folks with residential schools, Canada's whole bleak colonial history. So tomorrow we get the first occurrence of an official holiday in remembrance of that, which is great. We had like a presentation about it at work today that was really informative. And not gonna lie, makes me feel a little bit of a way about popping back into New World so soon afterwards. But that's just kind of how that is. And what else? Fuck. I played games last weekend, like a fair amount of games. I got really into Monster Train, which came out last year. It's a roguelike deck builder similar to Slay the Spire. It grew on me pretty fast. And yeah, I just jammed like 12, 15 hours into that thing over the course of a few days with friends. I fucking love games like that. You were telling me your friend Cole is also really into them. Like, I can just run games like that forever. I love those deck builder strategy games. It's funny, like that game as well as Valheim, they both are games that visually, when I first loaded them up, I was just like, there's something kind of, I'm like throwing slight shade here, I guess. There's something kind of Unity-ish about them visually. And I like didn't think I would really glue to it because I'm like, do I want to sink a ton of time into something that doesn't look like sort of all the way done in some ways? But as ever, game design is the thing that keeps you sticking around,
Mm-hmm.
When it feels tight, you just keep running the loop. So yeah, we'll see about that. I guess it's out on Switch too. News-wise, looks like you did a bunch of hunting. We could just talk about New World off the bat, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's finally a thing. Clearly, people are responding to it. Would you say 734,000 peak consecutive users? Is that what CCU means?
Concurrent users, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like the peak was.
That's insane.
I mean, based on what Steam says, Steam, and then there's another website called like New World Stats or something. I forget what it's called, but
yeah,
Status or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing really well. I think some of it is Amazon owns Twitch, so I think a little bit of that they've sort of.
How dare you, sir?
Yes.
Pre-planned and kind of, they should have no problems trying to get a bunch of Twitch influencers to play the game and stuff.
Oh no, they were
on launch day. I think they had like 1 million concurrent, like on Twitch playing.
Did you pay any attention to what they were doing during the betas, where they were already splitting like clusters of popular streamers into the three main sort of guilds or companies. I forget what they're called, but Marauders, the Syndicate, the Covenant. And it was like, if you watched Shroud, you were Team X, and drops have been enabled on like every fucking beta they've ever done. I mean, this is one of those situations where our sometimes idol Scott Galloway would say they own the rails, right? Like they have this extreme vertical integration with like, they've got Twitch, they've got the distribution system, they've got the back end with AWS to scale up and down. Like they should be primed to really just like knock this one out of the park. But like no one seems to be able to fucking play. And like it's not because... So they're spinning up massive amounts of new servers really quickly. It's like it's released yesterday, and each day it's like, oh, here's 29 new servers. Like I couldn't think of 29 server names in like that short of a time period, much less like spin them up. So like that's awesome, but it does seem like this apocryphal 2,000 player cap per server, which I don't know if it's the real number or not, but that sounds like it's kind of the bottleneck here. Like people were complaining about in Europe this morning, you had, a couple 100,000 people in queue, and like at 2,000 players a server, like how many fucking servers do you need to get people to be able to play? Like, I mean, what do you think they do about an issue like that? Just make literally 200 servers per region? Do you think they anticipated something like this? Do you think they would consider upping the population cap on some of these realms, which could upset the like whole ecology of everything? But
I mean, it's so hard to say, like, unless you really know their situation deeply. I imagine they probably have some slush, some room to up the cap on the servers. I think that's one recourse, right? Like when WoW Classic came out, that was one thing they did, was up the caps per server. But there's only so high you can go, because if there's too many players in a server, just the performance just tanks. It really kind of highlights the challenge of having these server models, right? Like they always talk about, I think Blizzard talked about like the one server model, like that they wanted to try to go to. And if you kind of look at the modern game, cross server kind of enables this sort of idea to an extent. But certainly you lose things with that, right? Which is tighter community and running by someone and knowing who they are and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's Amazon. They should, be plugged into AWS, spinning up. They should have endless, basically, servers, right? Like to spin new ones up. Theoretically, I just have no idea. It's just every live ops team is going to be totally different.
Yeah, and also like the thing that we can't speak to is we don't know what their server infrastructure is like, what their database infrastructure is like. There's a lot that we don't really know, that we can't speculate on. And I think it's like a little bit irresponsible to say, well, they're Amazon, they like own the internet, right? They own all the web space, because also like every project has a budget. You can't just be like, I mean, you could certainly say, fuck you, we own the internet, and if we need to have all of the bandwidth, we can just take it because we're also part of Amazon. But I think that there's probably a couple of bureaucratic steps that you'd have to go through before you just decided that like we're going to go way over budget on our whatever it is, our database infrastructure, our instancing, whatever it is that they're doing. It still has to fall within reason. So it's like that thing where you play an indie game and you're like, oh, I get it. Like indie doesn't have infinite resources like AAA does, but then you actually think that AAA has infinite resources until you like work in AAA, and then you realize that you're hamstrung at every fucking turn. So
yeah, I mean, as you point out, it's from the sidelines. You can make like a compelling argument for what's going on from either side. They either should be able to deal with infinite scaling demand, or this is a problem that extends beyond, resources, and they couldn't have really predicted it. And without knowledge from the inside, we don't really know. But I brought Omar up because I saw you raising your hand. I didn't know if maybe you had any like input on what's going on or impressions about the launch. What brings you in?
Hello, friends. I just wanted to say hello, first of all. But I have some experience in the space.
Yeah.
And just to expand on a few points that you might have called out, indie versus like AAA and budget and money. One thing, Candace, you touched upon, you can have all the money in the world, but money doesn't freely convert to outcomes, right? You can't you can't take $30 million and just instantly get whatever it is.
How dare
your goal.
you? How dare Valheim not give us a bigger update? They made $30 million, Omar. Also, to say that you have some experience is like the understatement of the century. This is Omar Gonzalez. He is he is a very veteran programmer on World of Warcraft since like the very beginning. He's a subject matter expert by every means, and now I'll let him keep talking. Sorry.
Yeah. The other thing to kind of point out is, yeah, like you mentioned, it's probably not because like Amazon doesn't have enough like computers in their data center. A lot of this seems like it comes down to where design and technology intersects and like what kind of experience they want to deliver from a game design perspective versus how to actually like implement that. Like in theory, you could design an MMO with the way like a modern, say, social network site that I won't name any names, but you can imagine imagine a world where you log into your profile and you try to message someone on your social media account and it just says, "Oh, that account doesn't exist on your server," right? Like that's not acceptable. Technology exists so that you can build like truly global high availability systems where you can interact with anyone in the world, but that then also like butts up against what game design, like what is the design of the game and what is the nature of a player interacting with another player.
Yeah,
So
how
that,
do communities form and how many maximum people can be in a cluster in order to encourage communities to form, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah, you can design engine we can engineer systems without those barriers that are horizontally scalable and have redundancies. You can imagine, you know, World of Warcraft, for example. Over time, you can see more and more of its game systems become sort of region wide, to the point where there's now very few systems that are kind of locked to like a single realm. Like you can imagine, like auction house and guilds, I think, for example, are still tied to individual servers, but the fact that they remain that way is not for technical reasons. Like they can be re-engineered to be completely region wide, and at that point you can just say, well, I play WoW in the North America region, and you can do anything with any player, and you can design
Right,
systems like that. But how do you actually make a compelling community from that? Right,
right.
where
It's,
the
it's the
chat
difference
room is,
between
yeah.
Hmm.
sorry, we're chat rooms.
Like, yeah, chat room that has 800,000 people in a chat room. Like what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the difference
Yeah.
between saying I'm from USA and I'm from Texas, right? You get those, you can immediately say like Texas is part of my identity or Lilliput is part of my identity or whatever the server name was. I thought it was really cute.
Yeah.
I, I'm really curious though, Omar, since we have you here, and I thank you so much for coming up.
Yeah, really.
How do you think that the roots of this game being a survival game might have impacted the way or influenced the way that they did this kind of infrastructure or made these kind of design decisions? Because it feels like to me, just like projecting a little bit, in a game like Rust, you only want 200, 500 people on a server, right? Or else it becomes chaos. So, do you think that like it would be enormously hard to take a game like Rust and then turn it into an MMO?
It probably depends on what kind of stability you want in that population, right? At a population scale of 200, if 50 people just like churn out of, that server or that gameplay session or that world, like that's going to dramatically impact like the outcome of the remaining players. But if 50 people leave like a new world server and the capacity is, let's say, 2,000 or whatever, it's not as impactful at that small scale. Like the cohesiveness of the world is much more sensitive to population dips and climbs. Depending on the nature of the game, that may be something you want, but that may be something that's then difficult to design around, right?
Right.
You can
Right.
have you can build, like, say Valheim, for example. Like there's just a pool of 2,000 worlds that hold about 200 people at a time, because that's what's cohesive for that world. But then some are going to get really overpopulated. others are going to be like less populated and they get into this negative feedback where, fewer, like more people abandon them and just turn into ghost towns.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Something interesting, I mean, Candace, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, or Luca, I'm not too sure in New World, but don't they sort of artificially try to restrict how many players play one of the three factions to try to balance it out on the server?
I do not know.
I heard something about that, like it sort of has like a set amount that you can just try to kind of make sure that there's not too much of one faction or whatever.
Yeah, I'd also be curious as to there's kind of two levels of restrictions in that case. And if you want to talk faction balance, there's like number of characters that are bound to that server, and then there's like the actual concurrency, like what is the population like that are actually logged in at any one point in time, because you can conceivably have like a perfectly even split in terms of numbers created on that server, but like at a certain hour of the day it could just be 50% of one faction. Like I wonder, like, is a restriction based on what's the population online at the time, or like total created? Because you actually need to keep both in mind.
Yeah, and really, it's hard to correlate the two.
Yeah.
Everybody may make a character on the server that Asmon's Gold is on, but they won't actually play there. And so, how are you going to discern from how many people have created a character on the server, but aren't actually going to be logging on and playing? So,
the more important question is how can 4 people who did not work on that portion of the game, who also have not logged into the game to play it, reverse engineer this kind of information in our armchairs?
That's the fun of these conversations.
Right, of course.
Yeah, of course.
It's theory. It's theorycraft.
I mean, I could go make Reddit posts complaining about the queue if you prefer. Like,
that is appropriate. I'm sorry, I just thought it was really funny. Like it's just so funny how much we don't know, and there's only little clues that you could pick up on, but you'd have to play the game for just a very long amount of time. You'd have to really understand, like, what happens whenever a server deflates. When enough people churn, do they just like move them in, which would be kind of questionable? Like, there's all these questions. Very fascinating space to think about.
Here's another one I'll toss out. Do you consider a game like Fortnite or Destiny 2, are those MMOs?
I mean,
kind of technically, yes.
I think that there's a lot of controversy about what MMO means. And like some people think MMO has to also mean RPG, which is not true. Like you can have MMOs that don't have, progression systems or anything like that. So it's just like there's a lot of gatekeeping to what MMO means. I'm on the branch of it being more generous. Like I would say that even Diablo 3 is an MMO, granted that you could massively multiplayer play with anybody that you wanted to play with, and that you can infinitely meet people.
I would agree too. I would consider Destiny 2 an MMO, and I think the gameplay design lends itself to, a technical back-end infrastructure that is elastic enough to handle great changes in demand and actually can deal with it fairly seamlessly, because you just spin up the worlds for the players that are online at a time, because you don't necessarily need to persist groupings of players over, a long time scale.
Yeah. I think that's a really fascinating topic. We should talk about that on one show. It's just like, what is an MMO anymore? Because I agree with you. I agree Destiny is pretty much an MMO, but the purists will just be like, well, if it's not 100% persistent, and if it has instances, if I'm teleporting from an instance to an instance, I don't consider that an MMO, because WoW kind of raised the bar there with having persistence and just being able to move from one zone to another seamlessly like that.
Well, and that's again with the semantics though, because if I'm gonna put on my little glasses and push them up like a nerd and be like, well, what do you mean then? My friend is open world. You don't mean MMO. Well, for a long time, all of those words were associated with the open world, the progression, the RPG, the MMO. All of those came together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that the semantics of the genre really apply to the problems that New World's dealing with right now, which is that massive simultaneous persistent concurrency. I mean, BR participants are capped at a certain number. In Destiny 2, you float from instance content to instance content. There's just not quite as much. I think that Amazon is really having to deal with this first wave of the post-influencer and hive mind, groups of followers world moving into a genre that expects lots and lots of people to be around at the same time. Because by the time, like, if 2,000 people were to try to crowd onto, Asmongold's WoW server at the same time, it's been made largely irrelevant by the fact that there's layering, sharding, there's tons of instance content people can escape to. But from what I understand, like, New World doesn't have a lot of those places to hide, and especially like its end game and its entire premises around this like PvP, and you have to engage with other folks, and they're going to expect these sorts of battles, right? So it'll be interesting to see how they handle it. It seems like, I'm sure that they're doing the best that they can, right?
And that's also a big challenge too, because if the end game is really about these three factions fighting over territory, you really need to have like somewhat of a balance between them, like an online presence of the three of them, right? I always wondered like about faction-based queues, especially if a server has like twice as many Horde than Alliance. Like maybe you just get there's separate queues per faction per server, and maybe that can kind of elegantly sort of balance the concurrency or the faction balance. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they'll do, because it's not going to be a good look if like your kingdom or whatever is being destroyed by some faction who can't even get online. Or you're the defending faction can't get online, and you're just getting trucked by the group who is online.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the problems that lies ahead. I mean, for right now, and I have to admit, I find, maybe I'm just old, but I find the terminology having to do with how servers are grouped and whom that will allow you to play with a little bit confusing right now. There's obviously regions, and then within regions there are world clusters, which I think are, a lot like what they do in Final Fantasy XIV. But so what they've pretty much done is, right now they're like, it seems like their goal is to let everybody who wants to play, who bought the game, be able to just get on no matter what, full stop. So they're spinning up tons of these servers, which are all capped at, 2,000 people per server. I don't know if that means like 2,000 people on at the same time, if it means 2,000 characters, what it really means.
If I'm guessing, I would probably, it's likely a concurrency number, so 2,000 concurrent.
But they're basically saying, hop on literally whatever server you want, as long as you get in sort of, I think you have to get in the same world server as a bunch of your friends if you want to play with them. I don't know, Argus Rho or Argus Theta or something like that. But the name of the server doesn't matter so much as long as you're in the right world cluster. And then the idea is, over the next 2 weeks, server transfers are going to be free. So I think they expect, as this pop dies down, people will be able to sort of shuffle around, and this will kind of work itself out. And at some point they can start to merge within these world clusters. Perhaps they could shut certain servers down. But I don't know if that really addresses the problem of like the streamer server, right?
Yeah, I have a conspiracy theory now that you mention it, because I remember I heard something about like the names are globally unique. Like character names are globally unique.
Are they?
Did I hear that right? Yeah. So like one of the problems was, I think, players, and then they had like staggered region launches. So I think like, some players in some regions for which it hadn't opened yet, like they were trying to log into other regions just to claim a name.
Right.
Oh, Rack, I didn't get my name yesterday.
So, but here's my on the surface of it, you're thinking, well, that's awful. Like, why would someone do that? But if you have globally unique names, then you don't have to solve the name collision problems when you try to recondense realms and clusters after the initial wave has died down.
I wonder if that was with guilds too.
So that might have been the rationale. Like on the surface, it seems like, well, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just, give separate namespaces? But yeah, if the plan all along was to be able to grow very quickly initially, and then, because normally the difficulty with that is when you want to like condense back down what happens to name collisions when you have like, two so-and-sos that were and they have the same name on two different source servers, and you're trying to merge them, like, who gets it? But if all the names of guilds and players are globally unique, well, then that makes condensing really easy, and they may just be planning for that.
That's fascinating. Yeah,
I think that one thing that helps alleviate the pain of this is the fact that New World's naming system is very, very permissive. You can include spaces, you can include hyphens, you can kind of go to town. So, Candace, maybe you can go wild. You can do your character name so that there's no confusion, right?
Yes, put Prime after it.
Yeah, exactly. The Candace R. Thomas Prime, so that people know exactly who's the real
Yeah,
one.
I saw a lot of Jeff Bezos characters screenshots. So
It is really cool to see a new MMO just pop off to this degree. People really are hungry for it.
yeah, I mean that's the one of the main like things I take from this sort of event is just that people will just want more sort of MMOs or virtual worlds or that sort of thing. So I think every MMO that comes out, even if it's just really crappy, always has some sort of shot. People just will give anything a try, you know?
Definitely, my hats are definitely off to their live ops team. Over the next couple of weeks because I've been there, man.
Yeah, I mean, you could just imagine all the conversations they're having, right? Like, I'm surprised they haven't called you up. It's coming. Yeah,
I'm laying low for a while. I'm out of the MMO base.
yeah.
I've done my time.
Well, if you change your mind, Omar, yeah. Hint,
You could
hint.
work with Candace. Yeah,
One more game.
Thanks for having me up. I have to get going, but it was fun to reconnect with you guys.
yeah. Omar,
That was fun,
anytime.
Omar. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. You guys take care of yourselves. Bye.
See you, Omar.
Bye, Omar. Bye.
All right. One other little news item we should probably hit, and then I'll pop into mine because I think it'll be kind of short anyways. Squid Game. I know you kind of wanted to talk about this, Chris. Roblox, I guess these like Squid Gamealikes are becoming really popular on the platform. Have you seen the show? Is everybody familiar with the show? It's like
I haven't seen it
Why
yet.
don't we just
but I
start
do
over from the beginning? Like, what is it? What's
Squid
going on?
Game. Okay, Squid Game is a new television show that has premiered on Netflix recently. It is Korean language with an all-Korean cast. And the rough premise of it is that lots and lots of people are brought together to play a game to win a massive amount of money, to escape crippling debts. There's a lot about it that is shrouded in mystery. The nature of the games seems like it's fairly simple. The consequences of losing those games fairly brutal. And so it's got kind of like a battle royale feel to it to some degree. I've watched a couple of episodes and it seems to get complex fast, and so I won't say anything more than that, but it is really gripping. It's very well shot. It sounds cool. It's replaced all the rest of the TV I kind of meant to be watching, and because it's based around games, it sounds like people are recreating the challenges they do in the show on roadblocks, which I just called
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
Roadblocks.
showing some of Roblox's the platform strengths, which is basically you could just make a game really quickly. Meme games can just pop off on Roblox, I think. And yeah, it's really interesting. They have like hundreds of thousands of players already playing these Squid games on Roblox. So I just thought that was an interesting event that's not really being covered very much in the media. So we'll see how that goes. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also really interesting to me that it's popping off on Roblox because Squid Game seems kind of like a mature
It's
show
very
to me.
mature. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a bunch of like preteens are playing this or younger. I have no idea.
Right next
but
to the style of games they play on the show do feel like they could be easily recreated in Roblox. It's just I don't know how much
yeah.
horrifying death happens in Roblox. I'm not sure if that's really the place for all of that stuff, but
It's really interesting with that age group too because they love being scared. Like that Five Nights at Freddy's is like a huge game for like preteens or kids. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the next generation just needs to get hurt to feel like they're alive right now.
Yeah.
Just joking.
no,
the
please
doomer
go on,
experience.
Candace.
Dystopian future, et cetera, et cetera. Man, you should talk about some sound things.
Yeah, sure, we can talk about some sound things. I feel weird trying to steal New World's thunder, but okay, so this is our third week of talking about stuff that we've made, and what I was thinking to talk about was working on the hero Mal'Ganis for Heroes of the Storm. I thought people might just find some of those anecdotes kind of interesting.
Can you, for those who don't know exactly, can you describe what like the day-to-day of your job is and this kind of stuff that you're responsible for?
Yeah, sure. So I create sounds and then I implement those sounds. There is a creative aspect to both sides of it, but depending on the game that you're on, you will probably spend more time on the creative side, that is creating a sound that just sounds really cool, or on the side of the implementation, which is putting the sound into the game and defining the conditions by which that sound triggers. Maybe, you hear it differently if you are the first person experiencing it or you're a third person experiencing it. Maybe you hear it differently if you're on low health. Maybe you hear it differently if you're empowered with a buff or something like that. So all the conditional stuff that might change how that sound is versus just the raw, creative quality of it. And at Blizzard on Heroes of the Storm, I was really lucky to work underneath a sound supervisor and like a former audio director that had a really strong vision for the game, which made making creative choices about both how the sounds were designed and how they were implemented like really clear. That is to say, you knew what fit in the game and what players were expecting and wanted, and like what didn't belong there. It was probably one of the stronger visions I would say I've ever experienced on a sound team. It was like a really punchy experience overall. You were meant to just make everybody playing the game feel like they were super powerful, no matter what they did. And so a lot of the sounds were just like really heavy with bass, and they all had to have kind of like a little hit to the beginning of them. They had to give you that immediate feedback, kind of no matter what you did. It was not a game for subtlety, that is to say. So it wasn't really like the style that I was used to designing in, but over time, I kind of learned that that's the cadence they had set up, and that's kind of what I had to do in order to fit in. It's really similar to when Chris was talking about designing the monk last week. You wouldn't just pop into WoW and design a class that plays like it belongs in a completely different genre of game and just jam it in. You need to know sort of like what the overall systems that you're kind of walking into are like, and how to fit your content. So sound has similar adjustments, I would say. So the hero Mal'Ganis, I kind of picked him because, for those who aren't super familiar with Warcraft lore, he's a Dreadlord character, which are these big, bulky, conniving demons. As a longtime Warcraft fan, I was like really stoked to work on him. And so on heroes, usually where we would start with creating a new hero is you want to know what the beats are. All Blizzard stuff is like really heavy with callbacks and nostalgia and references, right? A lot of Hearthstone's charm and its strength sonically is that it was able to pull these old unit references and these sounds that people knew. And so you want to identify those. So being a super fan of the series really helps. And then the other thing that the Heroes team would always do off the bat is they would go and record a lot of sounds. This literally means like getting together in a big studio room full of props and just kind of manipulating objects in weird ways to try to get interesting textures and stuff out of them. Do you all have any kind of an analog to what I would call a palette as a sound designer? Like the first thing I'll generally do when starting in a new like endeavor is try to create like a big bucket of kind of like related content to pull from, such that like everything I make is kind of cohesive, right? If I knew I'm going to be working on somebody that has ice spells, I might create just tons of sort of like icy stuff, scrapes and shatters and breaks and some really hard bassy kind of like crystallizes, and just kind of like filling my quiver with stuff to use, right? I don't know if you similarly with concepts or during like brainstorms, on new things, you sort of fill up with ideas or how you track those things, but that's something a lot of sound people do.
Yeah, in a good design document, you'll usually lead in with like, here's the vision of what I'm making. They'll describe what the thing that you're making is in terms that anybody who works on the project can understand. And then what you'll do is you'll give them that palette, that those sight-ins. So if you're saying, I'm making a elemental system like Genshin Impact or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'll like break that down and that's like a version of a combat system. But then there's like the Dark Souls combat system, which is very like flinch, twitch reactions, high high punishment, then like you put that down as a palette because you're like, that's a combat style. Or it's very Breath of the Wild with like, item durability and windows of opportunity to attack and planning your attack. And so like kind of like those kind of side-ins would work as a palette, just to build the reference of what you mean, so that they understand like the depth of what a combat style means. Does that sound similar?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's part of the kind of pre-production. It sounds like before you really launch into like a really collected effort on something from a design front, just sort of like making sure you get all your foundations built up. You're setting yourself up for success in the long term. On Heroes, this would generally be done by like recording a ton of props off the bat so that you've got all this cool, unique source sound that like will define that hero, and you have a lot of stuff to pull from. And it inspires you as you're recording it, right? For this character, I really did not manage to get a lot of interesting stuff recorded. I actually had a really hard time with kicking this dude off, but I had a really supportive team, and I managed to... I don't know. Well, you'll hear what I kind of dug into. But my first thing I would do what's up?
Oh, I was just going to ask, can you describe who Mal'Ganis is if people don't know who he is?
I think I already did, unless it was...
Oh, sorry.
Muted. Yeah. Chris posted a picture there. He's a big, chunky, conniving, cunning demon lord. He's like he's got kind of a bit of a permanent sneer. He's manipulative, but he's also brutal. He's got claws. He's got these really fat, leathery wings. So when I'm looking at him and thinking about the sorts of sounds that I want, I know that I'm going to need really heavy metal, heavy armor. All of his whooshes have got to be like really thick and full of body. I want the sound of his claws to really kind of come through. I figured that's a way that I would maybe differentiate him. He needs to sound strong, really, and I definitely think I would want to sell the wings. Those are the things I'd pay attention to there. So the first thing that you really start working on a hero, a good place to start is with just like the auto attack, because that's your baseline sound. And you kind of hit sort of like you kind of calibrate your hero based off that, because that's basically going to be probably the weakest impact of anything you designed, right? It's like, it's not supposed to be like a grand payoff. It's just kind of like routinely happening. But on Heroes, even the audio attacks, we did want them to feel good and be punchy. So it's kind of tough because even the dinkiest thing you're designing is supposed to be big. And then you get kind of in this like arms race with yourself and you kind of run out of stealing to do. Think of it as like power creep, I think is probably the game design thing there. So I'm going to try to play some of these auto attack sounds. You can hear some of the things that I did and hopefully they come through. Just basically made just some swing whooshes for his auto attacks, and then his auto attacks are very you can hear there's like, there's a big fat distorted kind of like right at the top. They immediately hit fairly hard. There's a lot of gore and, on this one especially, there's some metal and some slice. Like I did really want his claws to come through and kind of everything that he was doing. So that's just kind of like how you set things off there. And then, of course, he has a couple of different abilities, and that's where you really want to start creating things that feel really punchy and kind of powerful. So the first of his abilities is he had a spammable, what I'll call a Q ability called Fel Claws, which was basically just swinging directly forward, and it would move your character, and you could hit it up to 3 times to kind of combo it. Mm-hmm. And on the third hit, you would knock people into the air if they were caught with it. You could like blind fire this thing. You didn't have to target it. You just point yourself in a direction like action combat style and start spamming Q basically, right? So the casts are kind of very heavy and sort of like flamey. I thought about, should I try to infuse this when I see a name like Fel Claws, like Fel as an established sound in World of Warcraft is the other thing I was considering here. If you've played a lot of WoW, you know that there's this heavy, low demon kind of like whispery sort of sound to a lot of the... So I was like, well, should I imbue these into the whooshes? And I would try stuff like that, but it just felt like, someone made a comment about visual effects. There wasn't enough on the visual effect to me to really sell that there was Fel magic in this, even though the name was Fel Claws. So I kind of held off for that. So you have a couple of these different casts, and then the second ones. And they sound a little different just because the animation was different. And then the third cast was, so those had more of a rhythm, and they had kind of like a grind because he sort of scraped the ground and he would do like an uppercut. You have to keep in mind they're going to get layered with a ton of other things. The first and second swipes, if you hit a hero, has one type of an impact. They have that. You can hear there's like, it's just a very different sound. It's very bright and very screechy, and it has some elements in it that the first one does not, so that they can kind of stack harmoniously together. And then the third, and that would be if you just hit a minion, right? If you hit a hero, there was an extra boomf in there to make you feel even better about hitting a hero. And if you hit a hero in the third swing, which is the stun one, it's just kind of like a longer one, and then you also got this longer stinger. So the idea was supposed to be, it feels good even if you're spamming it, not hitting anything, just kind of swiping the air, but it feels better if you hit, minions and such, and then it feels even better. Oh, actually, wait a minute. Oh, these are the minion impacts. They're so light. The hero ones are slicier, and then that extra stuff gets added. So a lot of times with sounds, layering is how you build sounds up into something great.
Mm-hmm. You start with a bass and then you layer a bunch
exactly.
Of
you start
when you do a special, you use the auto attack sound. And
yeah, totally. Exactly.
Right?
Think of the satisfaction of stacking all your trinkets. It's a similar when you get all the ingredients in there just right, it feels great. So that was his really physical one. There wasn't a lot of what I would call abstract sound design there. It was really just he swings his claws. You don't need to think too hard about magic or anything with that. His second ability was this kind of fell shield spherical detonation thing that he did around himself called Necrotic Embrace. It's basically a point blank AoE Nova, I guess. And if you hit a hero with it, you got a bunch of armor, and it also did damage to them. So you could just kind of dry fire that one by itself, which I'm looking for. Oh, yeah. So you could just, if you don't hit anything, just a little pulse, but I really wanted to make quite a dramatic difference between, and if you hit a hero. So this is where I tried to start working in my version of some of this Fel stuff. I really started going into these screams and these scary sounds for him, like a kind of tormented soul sort of approach. I personally found that a lot of the WoW Fel sounds were just very heavy and kind of, bloated in a way that would kind of clutter up the mix of our game. It's sort of tough to explain. They would get lost because they were sort of very, very bass heavy. They would blend in. So that's why I kind of went with these screams and things like that. And then some little tails afterwards. You could talent this ability up to have plague bats come out of it and do additional damage. So I made a bunch of...
Oh, that one's cool, yeah.
Fluttery kind of plague bat tails that would...
How many variants? Did you do variants? Or?
Yeah, I do 3 to 6 for all of these, but there are some exceptions there. I'll go over his last main ability is just it's called Night Rush, and he would sort of fly around for several seconds. You could control him. You would launch into the air and do that, and if you hit somebody, you put them to sleep. So... It's kind of this weird takeoff thing where there's a wing unfurl at the beginning and then immediately goes into this kind of loop. It would kind of just, that sort of thing would loop over and over again. And again, I was just trying to go for something kind of unnerving and creepy. There is some whispering in the background on these loops. Just a little bit. So kind of, Fel type stuff, but not a ton. And then when you hit somebody, because you put them to sleep, I had to do work in the classic Warcraft 3 callback sound. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing people expect.
I get triggered when I hear that. I'm like, fuck, I'm being surrounded and by ghouls. This is what I think when I hear that.
Yeah. As soon as... Oh, God, the one other thing I wanted to share about Fel Claws that I really liked was... I wanted you to be, you were talking about the monk sound for the brews, gaining them last week and being able to hear something and not have to look at the UI, right?
Yeah.
The thing with Fel Claws, the spammable queue, if you remember, is that you had like a small window to kind of reactivate it if you wanted to be comboing it. And I wanted you to be able to know when your window to combo it was going to expire without having to like look at the countdown timer. So there's this sound that would just kind of like play and it would sort of ramp up and then there's that heartbeat. And so you could get used to the rising pitch of it and you could start to hear as a Mal'Ganis player, you'd know when you could, if you could still re-trigger it or not. And it would start to make you feel tense, right? Like as it gets higher, you feel that tension of like, shit, I better press Q again because otherwise, it's going to be out. So audio can really do a lot of like informing like that in addition to, empowering people. But yeah, so those are kind of his main abilities there. He had an ultimate called Carrion Swarm, which was just like a short channel time, and then you'd float around with this persistent AoE of a ton of bats swinging around you, and it would just do damage over time. And so there's a little kind of wind-up sound there, and that's where he's kind of spinning around, and he goes into like a vampire sort of formation, and then the cast end, it would kind of burst and then immediately go into... So he'd be floating around with a ton of bats kind of following him and then just kind of constantly have these flats playing, these squawks playing. It's tough to like simulate all these things playing at once. And then the bats would be hitting people and then eventually it would kind of calm down afterwards. I think there's like one or two other layers I didn't bounce out of here. I trust me, it sounded...
But you didn't... Where'd you get the bat sounds from?
Dude, I think those bats I made out of like monkeys. I think I took a bunch of... I think I took some monkeys and some stuff and pitched them way up and they started sounding like bats. And so I kept them. And it's great because I had way more monkey recordings than bat recordings. Yeah, so that one was pretty cool. Another fun thing that we got to do on Heroes was we would do skins. And we would re-sound design the skins as well to try to kind of flavor them differently. League started doing this way back when with some of their premium skins. I feel like maybe the Mega Man Ezreal one way back when was maybe their first. But, HOTS had this credo that we always re-sound designed the skins when it kind of made sense. So there was like a Cyberhawk skin for Mal'Ganis where he just kind of looked like he belonged in some sort of like... 80s mech anime. He had like a pilot suit.
Yeah, I posted that YouTube video in the live chat.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so that was basically like taking the existing abilities and then swapping some layers out to try to make them sound more sci-fi. So his Fel Claws went from like a very physical swing to more of a robot kind of. So these sorts of like womps in there, all these zaps and all this sort of stuff. Like when I was talking about making a palette earlier, is you basically want to just design like tons and tons of a bucket of sort of, sci-fi sounding womps and cybery shit, because then you can kind of pull from it at will to just sort of like sprinkle around the sounds and stuff that you want. So, and I think his Fel Claws sound, the available thing is... So I made the coming back sound a little bit more. Good. It's more like a jet, kind of. It's got that kind of flange.
Right.
Yeah, so it sounds more like
I love that.
His jet's cooling back down. So, I mean, it was just super fun.
What inspired you to do that?
I mean, I'm a sucker for details, and so I was like, I want to reskin every ability I can if it kind of makes sense. And I was just thinking about it's kind of like cooking, right? You feel like, well, there's a breath element in here. And like jet sounds are also sort of airy, so I can make a substitution, right? It's actually a lot like cooking. So it was about finding what elements of the original sound could be rotated out for something that sells the fantasy of him being, strapped with a mech suit. Just little touches like that, I feel like really would add up to, you want to make the skin feel more valuable and make people more excited to buy it. So the HOTS team was really great on stuff like that. And That's about the full extent of what I printed. I printed a couple other little like Easter eggs that don't have to do with him. I don't remember if we got him in the game or not. So we released a series of skins that were like Deckard Cain and two other people, maybe not Hanzo, but somebody else. Like they were in Jungle Warfare. It was like a weird Apocalypse Now era Deckard Cain. So he was kind of like the End from Metal Gear Solid or something. And so he was walking around with this radio and stuff on him. And I wanted his radio because he's such a storyteller type character to be kind of playing little bits of idle stuff sometimes. And I had fun making little Easter egg clips that would very rarely play of like, just like Diablo music that would like, just like cool. Occasionally kind of come out of his like tiny little radio speaker. And it was one of those things where it's like, it's such
that's always the fun part,
yeah, right? That's the type of thing that I was like, this is what people expect when they play Blizzard games, you know? Like you're looking for like the tiny little details that people throw in there. And so I actually had to argue with my boss quite a bit to like justify getting those in because we had a policy of not doing sounds for that type of idle. But I was just like, okay, well, what if I make them like super low volume and like a super low chance to play? And I had to demonstrate like it working to him in this way and that it was not intrusive. And then finally he kind of relented because he could tell I cared about it so much. Like I was so interested in kind of getting these little kind of like bits of Deckard Cain just ranting about, you know.
And behold, sanctuaries beyond.
That's awesome. I love that.
Just like little clips of him coming over the airwaves. And so that was a fun little thing to kind of bury in there. But anywho.
How long did it take to do his bass sound kit from like start to finish?
I mean, for me, honestly, I won't lie. I think he took me probably like about a month. I think for the faster guys, like Kowalski could bang out a hero. I think he did Yrel in like 2 weeks, Mephisto in like 2 weeks. That guy's a machine.
I mean, that's shorter than I thought it would take.
Yeah, and like that was when and that's when I'm like really on, I think. It takes a lot, like, okay, so here's the thing that I learned at Blizzard that I had not experienced before is that like I polished relentlessly. I'm looking at some of the folders of these sessions that I was opening up, and I did like 9 versions of Fel Claws, you know? Like that might just speak to the fact that I didn't get Fel Claws right, for example, like off the bat, but it's weird to look back and see like, man, I really ground this one out to like get it to a point. My boss was really exacting, and he had very candid and like very insightful feedback. And it was like, I really did get to experience this sense of Blizzard pushing for like a very high quality bar while I was there. Like it's really no joke. And that happens by you just relentlessly shopping it to somebody else, putting it in the game, improving it like bit by bit by bit.
Yeah, like doing separate sounds for base abilities for a skin. It's like not every game company does that, you know?
You could easily justify not. You could say, well, you're paying for the fact that he looks cool, right? But you recolored the vis effects maybe, but I'm going to look through some of these live questions now because I haven't been. Red Dawn. Yeah, I think if it would have to go through more people for a skin, maybe if there were more stakeholders, because it was like a collaboration with another brand or something like that. In terms of the microtransaction, he said, does your sound design have to go through more people when it's for a skin? Like, does it being a microtransaction require you to put more time into it or have more hoops to jump through? What I would say is that more expensive stuff tends to get more polish and more work because you have to do more of a value justification on it. HOTS would have some skins that did kind of feel like recolors and like not a lot would happen and we wouldn't really do a whole bunch of those, but then we would have like a very premium feeling event where we had, stitches inside of like a toy bear costume and we suddenly had like, we had a toys event, a holiday toys event, right? Some of the heroes became like plasticky action figures. And so I didn't change their sounds a lot. I changed them to make like when you moved, you felt clickety-clackety plasticky stuff. But, there wasn't like a ton of kind of reskinning we maybe did on their abilities. But Stitches being inside a bear suit and throwing entirely different objects and having fully different like it's clear when something's premium and is going to take like the lion's share of your work. I'm not sure if that helps.
Yeah.
If there's a desire, okay, well, is there a desire for Luca to create an iconic sound that makes it into pop culture? It would be great. I wouldn't say it's like one of my life goals anymore. I don't know that I'm quite as hungry as I used to be, but certainly I do like it when my sounds stick around. I get very bashful when people tell me they like certain sounds I've made. I never really know how to deal with it. But I got a lot of compliments about, I did a lot of the drop sounds for Destiny 2 when it first launched. So getting to do the sounds for like picking up rares and exotic engrams and stuff like that was pretty
really?
exciting.
I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah, because I knew that those would be big kind of like Skinner box moments for people. So those were fun to do. And I find I get tapped pretty regularly for people wanting reward type things because I used to work at PopCap and they just think of PopCap as like a joy machine because of Peggle. So seems this model has worked wonders for the HOTS LOL Dota type games. Wondering since the recent desire for customizable spells and skins for WoW, would the same model work at an MMO? Like, people will 100% take better sound design or more custom sound design. I think the thing is a lot of people don't know when they're really missing it. And then when it happens, you're just completely fucking blown away. A really common one that will get left on the cutting room floor, for example, is like if I change the gear my character's wearing, it heavily changes the sound of them moving around, right? Like it's in real life it would. Not every game is going to do this because depending on the context of your game, the sound of your character moving around and rustling in their leather is maybe not a high priority ticket item versus, a sword swing or a magic spell, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like you were mentioning with the Dota 2 Brewmaster. I mean, I had the same response you did to Dota 2. There was so much TLC put into all of the small sounds of those characters. And I think that stuff makes a really, really big difference. So I feel like in the Ascent, I would notice when I would roll around on the ground, depending on what type of armor I was wearing, it sounded like I was really doing a tumble inside of a big mech exoskeleton versus just like a leathery kind of flutter of wearing some lighter gear. Yeah, those sort of things really subtly enhance what's going on. WoW did a sound revamp just a few years ago in Legion where they revised a lot of combat sounds. And they finally fixed it up so that attacking somebody, with a dagger or a sword or a mace or an axe really started to sound different on auto attacks. Also, depending on if they blocked with a wooden shield or a metal shield, that's like just a level of detail that wasn't in the game originally. And I think people responded really positively to that remap.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, players get very emotionally attached to sounds too. I remember when I think WoW changed the rogue sounds at some point, like Cheap Shot and Garrote and Kidney and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't like the new sounds either that much. I like the original ones. It's just, there's always a risk of when you change the sound, players are like, what the heck? I love that sound. It's iconic. And it was really funny because I think when the team, the HOTS team did Valera, they used all of like classic rogue sounds, like with Kidney and Cheap Shot, etc. And so, the WoW team got reached out, just like, why don't look at HOTS as like giving players what they want, and you guys just change all the sounds randomly.
Night Stalker says, what do you make of the iconic rogue stealth sound being more of an implementation accident? I didn't know that. Is that the case? Was it just not meant to play?
I didn't even know that either.
Was it not meant to play as often? Oh, I see. It was only supposed to work on activation and not when someone is near you. So people ended up hearing it when a rogue was nearby, and that wasn't planned.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Wow, that's great. What a happy accident. I mean, it's great when stuff like that happens. It's not a bug anymore. It just belongs to the players now, so to speak, The rogue stealth sound effect. My friend Jeff Garnett did the rogue sound design for Legion, and he was fairly fresh on the WoW team, I think, at that point, and he was very aware of how he needed to preserve the stealth sound. And he used that stealth sound, I know, as his anchor to kind of guide him into embedding it and sort of mixing it with new sounds to kind of keep something familiar in there to make players feel like even though things are being changed, they weren't being like wholly re-envisioned, Like you have to respect in a live service game. I mean, as you two know as game designers, what players want, and you have to boil the frog, basically. You can't just change everything at once because you think something's better. So familiar sounds like that can be a really good like touchstone to kind of ease people into new stuff, right?
I remember when Kowalski was doing the sounds for the monk. He sent me this one sound, and it was supposed to be for soothing mist. And my response was, "It sounds like a penny going around a clay pot. You know, like those like pennies that you put in like those things, and it keeps spinning around the pot, like or whatever." And he's like, "That's exactly what."
I was about to say it probably was, dude.
Yeah. And so I was like, yeah, it sounds a little kind of pitchy, you know. Like whenever my sound feedback to sound designers usually were, it's a little too like pitchy or it's too realistic, you know. I think my feedback was always just like for a lot of them was just it needs to be more like fun. You know, like if you listen to like a lot of the early WoW sounds, they weren't kind of like realistic. They were just all kind of like weird and goofy. You know,
yeah.
I mean, a lot of them were pretty much imported from Warcraft 3, but trying to think of some because it's like, how the fuck do you make stealth? What does stealth sound like? It just sort of sounds just. I think the average sound designer will be like, well, it just sounds like you put your shoes on or something like that, or I don't know, right? Like it's you don't just instantly jump to like this like almost sci-fi sort of sound, right?
Yeah, so this is like we could get other people on here and do a whole episode on the sound design of World of Warcraft. Like I would love to at some point, but like the original WoW sound design, Brian Farr did a lot of sounds with the tools available then, and he divided a lot of sounds into like the different schools of magic into what he called like colors, sort of like sound colors. He had this system, and so it's kind of like his version of making a palette. So that's why there's like a certain tonality that you hear to like every kind of paladin spell in Classic, and like every warlock spell had a certain sort of sound. And so, you know, when I did White Mane, somebody mentioned they thought they heard Flash Heal. I'm like, that's because there's a very specific like woom, woom that people expect as the heal sound. That's the Warcraft heal tone. And I bet stealth, similarly, like when you hear that stealth sound, it sounds like a slowed down train whistle or something, right? Like, I don't know what it is. It doesn't sound like stealth, but you start to recognize it as that after a while because the association is so deep that like you don't even know why you think it's stealth anymore. You've just experienced it with your amygdala firing as you're about to get ganked, you know, hundreds and hundreds of times. So it's just like buried in there. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I mentioned in the chat because someone asked if you can do voiceovers, and when you bring us out of the podcast, you should do your Illidan.
Yeah, that's good.
One of my favorites.
I would agree. I think I would agree with Goose Comics. I think stealth is probably the most iconic sound in WoW 2.
Is it? Let's see.
It's the big one.
Stealth Blink is one.
I wanted to put. When we did some mounts to release with the Alterac Valley map for Heroes of the Storm, we released like an Alterac Valley War Wolf and a War Ram. And like I had to just start using some of those original wolf sounds. Like, you know what they are. And I wanted to put, I think we did, on the Alterac Valley map, when you get off your mount, we put in the WoW dismount sounds just to like really kind of grind people into that in that experience. But let's see. Yeah, there are a lot of iconic sounds in WoW over time. I haven't done a ton of work.
You worked with voiceovers, right? Or voice actors.
Have I worked with voice actors? I haven't done a ton of voice direction. That's kind of like its own skill. And when I have, it's been to try to get people to do like gargly zombie source or nothing like really credited.
Did you ever use your voice for any sound?
Oh, all the fucking time. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. That's a huge one. Oftentimes, because like, you know, if you hear something in your head and you can attempt to vocalize it, like the human voice is huge for just manipulating and doing things with. So at PopCap, I did that all the time. A lot of my take on the Plants vs. Zombies stuff was making mouth sounds and like weird boings and just kind of and just like weird sounds and just manipulating them into kind of comic-y sounding stuff, you know, just making silly noises and then working from silly noises, you know.
One time, I was like going somewhere with Jeff or something, and I closed my door, and he's like, "Can you open and close your door again?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And then he ended up like recording my door for an Overwatch hero. I don't remember what it was for, but
It's like with anything, right? Anything you learn deeply about, you just start making connections to it everywhere and seeing it everywhere. And sound people can be pretty fucking annoying to hang out with because they just want to keep pulling you out of the present moment you're living in to like call attention to something strange, like seemingly mundane, but interesting to them. Because
I feel like every discipline has their like quirk like that.
Mhm.
Like a lot of artists, you'll just go on a hike and be like, oh my God, look at that shot. And they'll just, or
Right.
level designers are like that. Or like, look at this light here or whatever. It's like, what? And game designers just when they're playing a game and they're just like want to overanalyze everything. It's probably annoying.
Cool. I don't know what time it is. It seems like it's getting kind of late.
7:20,
Yeah,
1:20
like
over.
I obviously could talk about sound all day, but I got to edit this thing afterwards too. So it's in my interest to not make it go overly long. Did anybody come up on stage? I haven't been checking to see if we got any hands or no.
We did it backwards this time, where we had a subject matter expert come up, and I think that's good.
Yeah, that was a really awesome surprise weigh-in. Next week we can more fully dig into it. Okay.
Yeah, next week we could just do more audience. Maybe it would be a whole audience round next week.
Yeah, maybe cool it off. Okay. What should I say for the outro as Illidan?
I don't know. Like, thanks for joining us, yada yada.
Want to buy Illidan exit impression, please? Okay.
We thank you as always for joining us this week on Theorycraft, your favorite podcast.
Maybe? I don't know.
I fucked up the last part. Sorry, I thought you were done. You took a breath.
No.
Weird.
We'll be back next Wednesday with more impersonations, or probably not. I'm gonna go back and post and do like the perfect Illidan impersonation. It'll be my reel.
Yeah, cut the one where I interrupted you.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Oh, I'm getting so nervous. My like heart's all racing fast. I've never done it for like public people before. We'll see you next week, everyone. Thanks for hanging out.
Later, gamers. Bye.
At long last, this week is complete. You are not prepared.
I just feel like now I'm not prepared.